Welcome to Pencils and Lipstick. This is a podcast for indie authors. I'm Kat Caldwell, novelist, short story writer, and book coach. Here on Pencils and Lipstick, we're obsessed with all things story, and it is my goal to bring you the writing tips that you need to make your
Hello,
novel
everybody.
come to
Welcome
life.
back to Pencils and Lipstick. I am Kat Caldwell, your host of the podcast, and this is episode 267 of the show. Today, we have an interview with Nancy Christie. She is an author, both traditionally and indie published, and it's going to be an interesting conversation. If you are interested in publishing short story collections, you're definitely going to want to listen to the show. And if you're interested in different genres, she writes in different genres, both fiction, nonfiction, short story collection, women's fiction. So she has a lot of information to give us, and her journey is just very interesting. Before we get into the interview, I just have a few updates for you. If you guys would just subscribe and review to the show, it would be good to get some new reviews. I know that reviewing things is kind of a pain, but it would help the show a lot if you guys would review it. It would sort of, we're kind of like a smaller show. And I really appreciate all of you guys who listen every single week. It's like a little family in the world, and I love hearing from you guys. Maybe what's your favorite show? What's been your favorite episode so far? I would love to hear more from you. I do love the emails that come in. If you go to katcaldwell.com/contact, you can just send me a little email of what you have enjoyed or who you want on the show. Today we have an author interview. Next week we have an editor interview. The week after that, we're talking to Spoken Press, who is kind of revolutionizing the audiobook industry for indie authors, which is going to be really great. Last week, we talked to Curios, which if you want to sell directly, I think that they are pretty much the easiest place to sell directly. They're new as well, and they want to make sure that authors keep all the money, which is, also revolutionary, quite frankly. So if you guys would review or share the show, you can tell your other writer friends about it. That would be awesome. Today, I kind of want to talk to you just a little bit before we go into the interview about audacity. It is May. We are already, zooming through the year. We're almost halfway through it. And I think, as I look at social media, writers on there, indie authors especially, it takes a lot of courage to put your book together and put it out into the world and to ask people to read it. We're kind of asking for reviews, which feels like judgment, and people are going to have a lot of thoughts on who you are, what you're writing, what your worldview is through your books and all that. And it can be pretty intimidating. People feel free to say whatever they want, right? These days. But we're kind of like in our own little world over here, writing the world that's in our head. And I don't know about you, but it can feel just like isolating and kind of like you aren't sure what to do, other than marketing a little bit, what do you do? Right. So I just want to encourage you to have maybe a little audacity this month on what you haven't yet tried in your book marketing. So, if it's been intimidating to maybe ask for an author swap of somebody who has a bigger list than you, maybe just send out that email or talk to them about it and say, would you, share your book with my audience and I'll share your book with my audience. No, share my book with your audience. I'll share your book with my audience, we can kind of grow together. In the end, the worst thing I can say is no. If that feels like too much, like too personal, I really encourage you to choose to either go on Story Origin app or Book Funnel. Maybe that's your audacious thing this month, to just sort of get on there, get set up. You can find newsletter swaps, and you're going to find people who are eager to swap, right? Like I turn mine on and off, and whenever I want to swap with people, and when people like sign up to swap with me, it's because I want to do that, right? And other people, when I sign up with them, they're on there because they want to swap with other people. Maybe you choose to be part of a promotion that or a giveaway that either through Book Funnel, through Story Origin app, maybe through Authors XP. Maybe you're part of, decide to be part of a promotion, which is like book sweeps or written word media, and you just that's your audacious thing this month. What can you do? I know there's a couple other places that are actually a little bit cheaper. It might be smaller audiences, but there's actually places on they advertise mostly like through author groups on Facebook. So you maybe do a little bit of research, ask your friends who are writers, see how they do promotions or who they've tried before. There's quite a few people out there, but just sticking your book in the midst of that whole handful of books that are being given away that month or that week or whatever it is. Maybe your audacious thing is going to your library and asking them, if they have a writers group or if they ever have author, like question the author, ask the author events like that you can be part of. Maybe you ask them how to submit your book to be put up in the library. Most libraries have a sort of submission form to go through, and that's just your audacious thing there. Maybe it's just sending an email to them or making a phone call and asking. Or maybe your audacious thing this month is to go to your local bookshop. And what's interesting is things different things are scary to different people, right? Like which one is the scariest to you is probably the one that maybe you should step out and go try. I have not gone to my local stores. It kind of freaks me out. But maybe I'll join in with you and do that this month. Maybe you try a local in-person fair. It's springtime, it's beautiful out, it's summer. There are so many either art fairs or music festivals or even book fairs probably going on around you. Maybe grab a friend and get a table together and, sort of be part of it. And I don't know, that'd be less intimidating, right? If you're with people. I personally really enjoy being at those in-person places. I think it's just fun to be outside. It's not fun if it rains. So I would suggest buying a tent, one of those little pop-up tents. But it can be really fun to talk to people. And since they're usually happening in the summer, you should be able to find one. Now, the biggest problem with that is that they might be full at this point. So then if they are full, maybe you go to them and you just wander around and say, okay, maybe I'm part of this next year, and you find out how they applied, right? And then you make sure to set your timer or something to apply so that you're there next year. Maybe your audacious thing is finding a podcast that suits you in the book that you have and whatever else that that you can offer to the world, and you send in a request to be on the show. That would be pretty cool. A podcast or a YouTube channel. All of these little things, it's a whole list of things that maybe people say we should do, or maybe we tell ourselves that we should do. And it's not necessarily true that we should or we shouldn't. It's whatever, we are our own business. We should market our book, right? But it's more about pushing us out of our comfort zone. We're already pushed out of our comfort zone by writing an entire book. So congrats on that. You have probably learned a lot in the process. You've learned to put together a book or find somebody to publish it. And so now maybe one more baby step this month. Find that place that you haven't tried before and see, just put yourself out there, get involved, put your book in another place. Maybe you ask for reviews from people, maybe from your social media or from your newsletter groups, asking for reviews. It can be tough, right? Right way back when I started, when I had my first book out, Stepping Across the Desert, I was intimidated to ask for reviews because I thought, what if they don't like it? And in fact, I went back and looked at a couple of reviews, and one person just really didn't like the book, and they felt very free to tell the world about it. And you know what? It's okay. It's okay. A lot of people do like the book, and so you just sort of have to navigate those waters. But that might be your step of audacity this month, just asking for reviews and reminding yourself that somebody out there is not going to like it, and they're going to tell you so. um, but it's okay. You need to focus on all the people who do like it, right? And just reminding ourselves that this whole thing is a journey, and it is something that, we will learn how to do things as we go, and we'll get better and better as we go, right? I think somehow we think like every single author just knew what they were doing right away. A lot of them, maybe they have a publicist behind them, or they're traditionally published and they have a marketing team behind them, and so it looks like they know everything, but I can guarantee you nobody knows everything. So maybe our audacious thing this month is to set up a an account on a social media and just sort of put yourself out there. I joined this marketing class in March, and they've been pushing me to make videos and actually show my face and talk. And oh, at first it was really intimidating because I am not 20 years old. This is not part of, social media has not been part of my life my entire life. So it was a bit intimidating, but it's getting easier. I'll tell you, the more that I do it, the easier it is. So I can encourage you with that. The more you do audacious things, the easier it is. The more bookstores you go to, most likely the easier it is to ask. The more in-person fairs you go to, the easier it is to talk to people. I can attest to that one. I've done that one. The more swaps you do, the easier it is to ask. The more reviews you ask for, the more reviews you get, the easier it is to sift through them and to accept what people have said, right? All these things get easier. The more editing we get done, the easier it is to accept that editing. So I just encourage you to choose a way to be audacious, push yourself, push your book in front of people, um, and keep going, and then enjoy the rest of the month because it's beautiful outside. Go outside, touch some grass, breathe in some air, all those things. So let's get into the interview because I know that that is mostly why you guys come here. Nancy Christie is an award-winning author of 3 novels: Reinventing Rita, Finding Fran, and Moving Maggie, 4 short story collections, um, 2 books for writers, and an essay collection. I told you guys she's done a lot. She is the host of the Living the Writing Life podcast, and she has given presentations on a variety of topics at conferences, libraries, and schools. She's a pretty audacious woman. So that's kind of where I got this thought of being audacious. She's very inspiring. Check out Nancy Christie's website at www.nancychristie.com. Of course, the links will be in the show notes, where you can sign up for her newsletters and find links to her social profiles. You will also be finding the link to her books as well in the show notes. So I encourage you guys to go and check out her books and check out her website. But before you do that, let's get into the interview. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Pencils and Lipstick. This is Kat Caldwell, and I am talking today with Nancy Christie. She has written so many books. She is a short story writer, which is close to my heart. She's won a couple of awards. We're going to get all into it. Her YouTube page, you guys are going to want to check out as well. But first, let's welcome Nancy Christie. Thank you so much for coming on and talking to me today.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a lovely start to a Monday.
Yeah, it is. Once we got Zoom to work. So you have been writing, it seems like, for a while, but you kind of like you told me you got a little bit of a late start, but was that in your book writing, or was that in all kinds of writing? Like, how have you gotten into becoming the writer of novels and short stories?
Yes, I have been writing like forever. After my mother passed away, we found in a collection of things, my mother saved everything, a short story that I actually did as a little book that I wrote in 2nd grade. So that gives you an idea. We are talking half a century of writing.
Right.
No, longer than that. I'm 71, so you do the math. But anyhow, in any case, yeah, I guess it would be a lot longer than half a century. In any case, but yeah, I always wrote short stories,
Okay.
just never thought of
Just for
having them
fun.
published.
Yeah.
Well, and it's because too, if you think of the time frame in which I was writing them, we did not have the internet. Therefore, we
Yeah.
did not have online literary magazines.
Right. Right.
And we also, the town I lived in didn't have a bookstore. So all you had was libraries. Authors didn't come there. The whole idea of ever being an author had never occurred to me.
Okay.
I just wrote for me
Yeah.
now. And then in the mid 80s, I started writing for newspapers and magazines. And that was actually my occupation as a freelancer.
Okay.
And, which I'll tell you what, it was absolutely great training for learning how to edit.
I
Because
bet.
especially when you worked for a newspaper, a small newspaper, if you if you didn't edit it down to fit within the parameters of, say, a column, the guys down in the composing room would take their X-Acto knife and literally cut the copy. This was before computers. So you had this long, maybe 2.5-inch wide strip of copy, and they would paste it on the layout, and whatever was left, there it went.
Even if
And
it affected the story, it was
oh
just
my
like,
God, it was like, and because I also worked as the copy editor for the paper because nobody else knew how to spell. So I would be in on Saturdays and I would tell the guys, okay, when you're shooting my stories, give me 5 minutes, and I would have to edit immediately
oh
to
wow.
make it work, right? So you did learn how to edit.
Well,
But
you got rid of those like extra words, right? That's not a
oh
hard
yeah,
thing for you.
absolutely. It's like, okay, how can I shorten this? I got to take 3.5 column inches off this story. I can do.
Yeah.
And yeah, so you learned how to do it. But I also learned how to interview people, which was really helpful.
Okay. So you did
So,
like everything at this newspaper.
oh yeah, I did. I mean, that was the beauty of it being a very small. Well,
Hmm.
we put out seven weeklies and one daily, but it was just, I learned so much. I mean,
Yeah.
I do much better learning along the way, and the guys were really patient with me. So I did learn a lot. And of course the magazines, that was a whole different ball game because you had to turn the story in and had to fit within. So, but the whole idea of writing a book didn't occur to me. It wasn't until the year I turned 40 that I had my first short story published, which I couldn't believe that they actually took it. It was like I thought they must have made a mistake and sent the acceptance to somebody else. But
Was
yeah,
it a contest or did you just
no,
sort of
it was
decide on a whim
just
to?
I had written this short story, and at that time I was starting to like in Reader's Digest and that, where they would,
Mm,
or yeah, the different
yeah.
magazines, they would say, oh, you could submit to this
Hmm.
magazine. And oh, that's when they were really, I mean, we are not talking like plowshares or something. We're talking, almost newsprint type little things. But they took my very first short story, and I'm like, oh my God. I mean, you didn't get paid or anything, but that wasn't the point.
Feels good.
I mean, yeah, it was like, because up till then I'd seen my byline, but they were work writing.
Yeah.
This
Yeah, it feels
was
different.
completely the fiction. And I really, I was shocked, I was thrilled, I was so happy. So, but yeah, my first book, which is The Gifts of Change, and an essay collection, came out the same year I turned 50.
Okay.
And that was purely by accident that I wrote a book. I was journaling because my mother had been diagnosed with cancer.
Oof. Yeah.
So I would journal every morning. That my parents lived in Florida, I'm in Ohio. So I would journal every morning before I called her, to kind of get out, you
Mm,
know, the worry and the grief and a lot of anger. I was so angry this happened to my parents. I was like a
hmm.
little kid going, it's not fair, right?
Right, right. It isn't fair.
So,
Cancer
and then
sucks.
eventually, as journaling can often do, they turned into from purely personal journal entries to more broader essay based. And I had a couple of them published in magazines. And then I thought, I wonder if this could be a book. I wonder if this would help anybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
And and of course you had to find a publisher who would take unagented first time fiction from somebody, or first time book from somebody, manuscript, who had no platform. because this sort of
Yeah.
falls under self-help and whatever. And it's like,
Right.
so,
And we're talking like early 2000s or mid 2000s.
yeah, it came out in the book was published in 2004. Beyond Words, I think, accepted it maybe like in late 2002 or 2003, possibly.
Yeah, we're still like, we're very much in the traditional publishing phase at that point. So you would have had to
Right.
find someone to,
Yeah.
Otherwise you'd be printing it by yourself. Like that would.
Yeah. And of course, back then to self-publish, I mean, that was like the kiss of death.
Yeah.
You know, oh, it must
Yeah.
be vanity. It's not worth the paper. And I wouldn't have known how to do it anyways.
Yeah. I actually
So-
remember looking that up. And there was some guy, I think I've said this before on the show, like I remember reading about a guy that would go from show to show selling his sci-fi book, I think a fantasy book, and he was making quite a bit of money, and yet still the traditional publishers were like, oh, but he vanity pressed that book.
Yeah.
It's like, well, it must be worth something, like people are buying it, and somehow he must, I don't know how he did it, like he got it formatted and printed, and he's lugging around all those books, thank goodness we don't have to do that anymore. But so did you get the bug then? Were you thinking I'm going to write another book, or were you like, that was just a thing?
Well, that, it was kind of like, that was a one-off. I've never felt the urge to follow up because that was very specific to what was going. And my mother actually passed away the following year, so she got to see the book.
Okay.
So then 10 years went by.
Okay.
And in the meantime, I'm still doing short stories and still working for newspapers and magazines and blah, blah, blah. And I had so many it sounds like you're a short story writer.
I love writing short stories.
Oh, yeah. So I had a ton of them, not only saved on my computer, but I still had ones that I had typed years ago. And I thought, oh, I had come across a small press publisher, really, really teeny tiny small. And she wanted to put out some collections, and she put a pitch out. We all belong to the same organization. I can't remember which one. And so I knew what I was going to call it. It was really funny. I already knew the title, Traveling Left of Center. I even knew what I wanted for a cover. I mean, I'm no artistic person, but I could like visualize it. Okay. And so all I had to do was kind of go through all those stories until I found about, I don't know, 55,000 somewhere in their word count stories. And I pitched it to her and she took it. So that still falls under traditional publishing. So like my short stories and The Gifts of Change, which is the first book, are traditionally published. Actually, The Gifts of Change is now out through Simon & Schuster. And it was translated in 3 foreign languages. Go figure that. But awesome. But yeah, and the short stories now, all 4 of my short story collections are out through Unsolicited Press, which is another small press publisher. This one in Oregon, because the first one went out of business. So
well, yeah, the short story collections, I get a bit frustrated, or short stories in general, like it seems to be a niche thing these days, but I argue that it's really fun to read a short story. Like it doesn't take all weekend or, a week. Take a little bit longer to read books, but some people can read them that quickly, right? It's like gives you a little burst of adrenaline and, like escape from the world for a minute. And I don't think any publisher uses that to their advantage. We all like these short little movies, but I mean, they should be getting people to write short stories. I just don't, put a little visual to it if you want, but short stories you can have so much fun with. But everyone's very focused on novels, which I love writing novels as well, and clearly I like to read them. But yeah, I just, there's also something to having to get a whole story to fit into a couple pages is different, and it makes it like forces you as a writer to do things differently, and it's a bit more challenging, I think. What do you think?
It really is. For one thing, my short stories, for the most part, some of them tend to be a little on the weird side. Some of them tend to be a little on the dark side. I can go dark with a short story because it's in a controlled space.
Yeah.
I couldn't do 85,000 words of of a dark psychological thing because I can't handle it. I
Right,
get
right.
so into the story that it would be, okay, now I need counseling to recover from it's
Exactly.
like being in a bad relation, well, not a bad relationship, but a relationship with a lot of drama.
Right.
Even if say, that you lose somebody that you love. So for
Yeah,
me,
your brain has to go real dark to like, what's going to happen to this character? How can I make their life miserable? Like,
mhm.
that's a lot of thinking on miserable things, you know?
Oh yeah. But the other thing I like to do, and you can only do it really with short stories. Well, I suppose a really good novelist could do it with a long, the novel, but sometimes I will set myself a challenge. It
Hmm.
was like I wrote this short story called Still, Still. And I looked up how many how many ways can that word still be used?
Mm.
It can be a noun, it can be a adverb. I'm like really bad at this. Well, it can be an adjective, still water, whatever. So, and then I wrote a really short story, but that word kept repeating, but each time it was a different part of speech.
That is
And
fun.
it was a sad psychological short story, but it's like just for the heck of it.
Yeah.
Just to, and you can do that. You can you can challenge yourself
Yeah.
with a short story that maybe, I mean, obviously you couldn't do that with a novel because people would not notice the repeat of the word.
Or they would and they'd slam you for it and they
Well,
wouldn't
yeah, that's
understand
true
it.
too. Do you not
I
have a
think I feel like
thesaurus?
you can be a little playful, a little more intellectual, a little bit more and like with a short story. And I honestly I think some writers these days don't realize that really what they're trying to cram into a novel would actually work better as a short story. A lot of times when you just sort of see that scene and
Mm-hmm.
you think, okay, if they were encouraged to move, like, how could that be an entire story? What could you
Right.
do with that, right? Instead of trying to like bring out 85,000 words on this one thing, but lots of people don't want to listen to me on this. But I think that comes back to like you can no longer really um have a full career on short stories, way back in the 30s, the 40s when
Right.
you in before that people could sell like lots of our famous classical writers, sold their parts of their novels or wrote short stories or whatever, but oh, the world has changed, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, they are definitely not. I mean, it would be very, very difficult to get an agent
Yeah.
unless you are just so stellar with your short stories, or unless you are already an established novelist. And
Right.
then the short story comes out and they're going to kind of like piggyback off of, oh, the Pulitzer Prize winning novelist of XYZ title has now released a short story collection.
Right. Right.
But I have noticed there is very little correlation between now my three novels, because they fall under their own little category, and any of my short stories. Some of my short stories are a little more playful, light, contemporary, but for the most part, we're talking this this part of the house and this part of the house.
Yeah, isn't that is funny though, like because I guess maybe it just goes into what we can figure out to write a whole novel about versus it does feel a little bit different when you say that. Somebody told me I should put a collection together and I was like, none of them go together. They're all so different, because I'm always playing with something different. And
Mm-hmm.
uh, so I haven't quite focused on writing something that would go into a collection. But so when you were writing those short stories, did you think for a minute that was what you were going to do, or did you have the idea that you wanted to write a novel?
I never I never wanted to write a novel. It's really funny. You'd be doing a book signing for your short story collection. Someone would come up to your table and you'd do your whole little spiel on whatever book it is you're promoting. And there'd be like a pause. Do you have a novel? I mean, it was like,
That's so
no,
funny.
I have my short stories. Clearly I have short stories, right? I never thought I could. I guess
Okay.
that would be the way to put it, because I mean, probably my longest short story came in at 13,000 words. And I was thinking, oh my God, I couldn't write 85,000 words. I mean, how would I even do it? And the first novel that I wrote, although it was actually the second novel that was published, Finding Fran, I thought I was writing a short story. Because
Yeah.
I'm
Right.
people will laugh at me, and we just had this conversation at a talk I was giving. I am a very scheduled, regimented person. So for my writing, that means basically I have no idea if it's going to earn me any money versus client writing. Um, I start, I get up at 4 and I start at 5.
AM.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
Now, I would like to also point out that I am totally useless after 8 o'clock at night, but that's beside the point. Yeah, I'm an early riser.
You're an early riser.
So it would be like, and I had gotten a little away from writing because there was a lot of things going on in my life, and I was afraid that I was never going to write again. It's like the last thing I wrote is the last thing I'm ever going to write, because
Okay.
it's like your car battery went dead. I don't know if it can be jumped or not, right? So I thought, all right, here's what I'm going to do. And I've actually turned this into a writing exercise. Every day, I'm just going to sit there and write for 30 minutes. It may be total no good, but I'm just going to write for 30 minutes. And then I'll go on to, whatever I'm doing for that day, income earning. So I started writing, and I tend to always start my fiction with dialogue. So I started writing this, what I thought was going to be a short story. And after I hit, I think it was like about 25,000 words. And I was like so into this story. It's like
You were handwriting this?
No, are you kidding?
Okay.
I'd never be able to read
I was
it.
imagining you at your kitchen
No.
table.
And by this time we were up to having computers.
Yes.
So it would be like, I was so excited about the story.
Right.
Couldn't
Yeah.
wait for my next 30-minute interval to work on it. And I thought, I was setting no expectations.
Yeah.
It was not like, oh, I'm going to finish this and get it published. I just want to see if I could do it.
Yeah.
And the very first draft topped in at around 60 some thousand, which I knew wasn't long enough. But I was just like, oh my God, I wrote an entire story.
That's so cool.
I mean, it needed a lot of work, but it was just a whole story. And it makes sense from how it started to what happened to how it ended, just like my short stories make sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then I waited about a month, and then I did it again, which was actually the first book that got published, Reinventing Rita. And then I put them aside because there was family stuff going on. I was teaching workshops. My writing business was going really well. And I thought, that was really cool. I did it. And now I know I could do it, but I'm not thinking about it as something I'm really going to pursue.
Okay.
And so it actually wasn't until, what year is this, 2025, till 2023, when I actually released the first novel, second one written, Reinventing Rita, because I had gone through obviously several years worth of revising and rewriting and learning how to write a novel and checking all your little details, make sure the eye color is the same throughout the entire story, but which is not things you need to really worry about when you're writing a short story, because you can
it's easy to check.
reread it, right?
It's so easy. Yep. I have to be like, wait, what was that guy's name?
Yeah. And how old and when was he born? And oh yeah, that happy stuff. But yeah, and it was like the first one came out, it was pretty well received by the readers.
Okay.
Which was all I cared about. And so then I thought, okay, let's dust Fran off. So while the first one was going through production, I started working on Fran. So I'm basically doing a book a year.
Okay. Oh my gosh.
So,
and was that traditionally published as well?
No, I used BookBaby for all my novels, because I mean, I know I could have hired a cover artist, learned how to do formatting, found out about distribution. To me, the
Believe
way
me,
I
it's a
work,
lot.
well, and not only that, I think because I have always been self-employed, I understand the value of
time.
hiring people who know what they're doing to do what they're doing so that you can do what you're doing.
Yes.
So,
And if you are running a business on the side, all of that time that you could be working for your clients, you're going to have to now be figuring it out yourself.
And it didn't make good time sense.
Yeah.
So it made more sense to me to tell Book Baby, here's the manuscript in Word form. You guys do your thing. You do the cover, you do the formatting, you handle the distribution and everything. And I don't have to deal with any of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've been talking to a couple of people because about that and like really understanding the pros and cons, because there's no right way to do it these days, right? There's so many ways to get your book out. And what people don't understand is just what you said. Your time is worth a bit more than you actually give it value for, right? Like kind of, it just depends, if you're a 22-year-old that understands computers and you know how to do all this stuff, and you're out there on TikTok selling your book before it's even like that, yes, more power to you, but yeah, and I'm not sure, and I'm not a numbers person, I'm not sure in the end that you actually save that much more money. And that's something that I think should be talked about a bit more, because you got to go find that book cover artist. You got to make sure that they're doing the right thing. You have to learn something about it, because you have to approve it. They will red stamp anything you say, yes, done. They're not on the hook for whether or not that cover is right for your genre, right?
Exactly.
So you still have to figure all that out, the formatting, everything. So it's definitely something that should be investigated and not just assumed that you're going to save.
Well, and it also, you have to allow time for marketing. I mean,
Yes.
when I was working on the rut busting book for authors, and I had so many contributors to that. So I was talking to a couple of really top book marketing people. And I remember one of them saying, you should start marketing and promoting your book when you first start writing it.
Yeah.
So that you get people invested in it. Well, if you're already running a business, now you're going to be writing a book and you're going to be marketing your book. So now you're running two businesses. Where does it make sense for me? The learning curve would be so onerous that it's like, just pay Book Baby.
Yeah.
It was really, when I looked at the time, it was really a very reasonable price.
Yeah. Yeah. They're not expensive.
No.
There are other places that will take you.
I don't have to deal with it.
Exactly. And you have a place that you can go back to for quality control, right?
Exactly.
Like when I first started, I don't know how I did it, but somehow I uploaded my book with like double chapters. And you're just like, well, I don't even know how this happens, like going back and like, you can't, at least in that point, you can go to BookBay and be like, hey, you fix this right now, instead of stressing out at midnight trying to figure out, nobody knew my book was out, so it didn't really matter that much, but it was stressful.
Absolutely.
So now you have 3 books out. Your latest one is Moving Maggie.
Yeah. So that's my 3rd novel, my 10th book.
And your 10th book. And these are called a midlife moxie novel. So tell us a bit about this series and how they fit together. Because your first one was the Reinventing Rita. That's the one that just sort of came out, or that was the first one that published?
that was the second one. Finding Fran was the accidental novel.
Accidental. Okay. So what was the theme about them, and how has it become this series?
Well, I knew that, I know there's popular genres. I mean, you can count on fantasy to sell. You can count on your traditional romances to sell. I knew there were certain, unfortunately, I had no interest in writing those. And when it comes to YA, I would be the worst person to write anything YA, because what do I know about what is young adult now? I mean, it's a little different than when I was a young adult, right? So I knew that I wanted to write novels that featured women who were 50 and older. I have deliberately chosen not to bring up menopause in any way, shape, or form, because anytime you say a woman is approaching 50 plus, oh, she's menopausal, she's incompetent, and she's incontinent. I mean, those are like the
Yes.
three adjectives for women, right? And I thought, no, I'm not going to go there because that is too much a cliche.
And it's such a small part of what a person is. It's like, yeah, all of our bodies are changing at 50. Why don't they talk about men like that, for crying out loud?
I know. But I definitely wanted to look at what happens to women in their 50s.
Yeah.
Okay. And there's so many different experiences. You could have anything from the traditional stay-at-home mother who's suffering now from empty nest because the last one
Right.
left the home. She doesn't know what to do.
Right.
To a woman in her mid 50s, early 60s, who now gets booted out of her job. That's what happens to Maggie because she worked for a small hospital, a big hospital system bought it, and they're like, oh, we don't need you. Well, you really don't want to be 60 looking for a job. You could have somebody who was maybe a caregiver
Right.
for, say, their elderly parent. The parent
Happens all the
passes,
time.
and now you're like, who am I now?
Yeah.
So there are so many different life experiences that happen to women when they hit that late 40 on up stage. You could be falling in love for the first time in your life. You could be getting divorced after 25 years, right? So that's what I really wanted to focus on it. And what's funny is when I do book signings, and I'm talking to women because clearly you can tell I like to talk, but the women will tell me their personal story dealing with the midlife stage.
Right.
And they're all different. And I keep track of them because it's like, oh, that's a good plot. I could use that one or integrate that into a story. But there is so much, but it's also a time to start over, to explore new avenues. And I don't think that ever gets looked at. It's almost like you're 50, but make your will out, you dig your grave.
Please go over there. Like 50 is not what it used to be. 70. I mean, I would not have guessed. You're like my mom, it's not what it used to be. I look at it like with my mom, like you've got probably at least 20 years left. Like if you, do your daily walks and you take care of yourself, you've got that's a lot of time.
Yeah.
That is a lot of time on this earth where you get to do stuff, but it is true. Society has not shifted, like they do not value, our American society doesn't value over 50 as we should. But 50, my goodness, like I'm approaching 50. I better not be. I have a lot of life left. I feel like so many of my friends.
What's interesting is if you read any of the British novelists who are writing like Claire Pooley. I love Claire to death. I had her on my podcast. When she writes about women, they are women 50 and older, and they are living very interesting, exciting, different kind of lives. The Brits seem to value, maybe because they had a queen, but the Brits seem to have no problem at all writing novels where a woman at midlife is the main character, and she's just like going gangbusters. But over here in the US, you read the 20 or you're nothing, right?
We're all about the 20. What's so funny to me is sometimes I'll pick up books and she's like 22, but she's as wise as a 50-year-old. Really? Just the way that they write it, and you're like, there's no way you know any of this stuff when you're 22. Like, we're idiots when we're 22, like. And I was semi-mature at that age, but my goodness, like there's no way I don't know. Just my opinion. Somebody's going to get mad at me for having something. But I have seen a growing trend of midlife age characters. I have a couple friends writing them because I think that the same, they're getting frustrated. It's like not all of us as we grow. If it's a well-written book, I don't care, how old the protagonist is, but there is something to being like everyone falls in love when they're 24 and lives happily ever after. Like that's not true. Where are the other books? Like what else is happening? So I think it's great that you're writing midlife. And so what is Moxie for anyone listening that
it's funny because that was a term, I think that was used like back in the 40s, which basically means a woman who can kick, fill in the blank. But it's somebody who really has a lot of inner power. She's ready to go out and take on challenges. And now I've noticed a real resurgence. I mean, it was funny because when I was doing research to make sure that no one else was already using the term midlife moxie, there's like, Moxie hair salon, Moxie this, Moxie that. I'm like, okay, cool. But it is really about having the courage to go after what you want, not letting people get in your way. I mean, to me, if somebody tells me, wow, you got moxie, I'm like, of course I do. May use other words for it too, but yeah. And I mean, it was because I knew, even though each novel complete standalone, they have no connection to each other, totally different plot lines, but they all fall under the umbrella because the main characters are in that age group, right?
Okay.
So although I do bring in younger characters, because I think we can also learn a lot, you should have a really diverse group of friends.
Yeah, absolutely.
Learn more from the ones who are 10 years older, but you can learn a lot from the ones that are 20 years younger.
Like how to fix your phone.
Well, that too. But it's just, I wanted that whole midlife moxie because I thought I needed for branding purposes and also to really describe it. I thought that sounded like such a positive take on midlife instead
absolutely.
of middle-aged.
Yeah, no, I hate that term, honestly. So, but these are like women's fiction, would you say?
Yes, yes. Okay. Women's fiction, contemporary fiction. I like to refer to them as beach reads for the older women. It's not heavy drama. It's not like serious, no one's battling a life-threatening illness or something like that. I have to say the one that I'm writing now that'll come out next year, it does begin with a woman, the main character, becoming a widow at, how old is she? 63. But there's not like, because I didn't want it to be like heavy, dark drama. But there is a lot of introspection, a lot of unexpected experiences, a lot of setbacks, a lot of whatever.
Yeah, that's a big thing that happens to a lot of people.
Yeah, but definitely, I mean, I can see it as a beach read.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So it has some conflict in there, but it doesn't depress you for your vacation. Right?
You got it. Exactly. I have to write the darn thing. I don't want to be depressed for a whole year. So
and a little bit of romance, it looks like sometimes.
Yeah, especially in Maggie. Maggie is the first one where I really started integrating a little bit, although it would not be called a romance.
Right.
I mean, it wouldn't fall under that genre, but there is a little bit of romance. There is, because it does happen.
Yes.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. So, but definitely it's more about learning about yourself, going after your goals, and also how supportive your female friends can be.
Right.
Because the older you get, the more you realize that if we thought our girlfriends were important when we were teenagers, you wait till you're in your 50s and 60s and life is coming up and smacking you in the face, and you kind of need that mommy hug. And maybe you don't have a mommy anymore. So your girlfriends actually take on the mommy hug.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, absolutely. So these, the Midlife Moxie novel series, we will have the link to them in the show notes. So the latest one is Moving Maggie. It's small on my screen. That is Moving Maggie, Reinventing Rita, and Finding Fran.
Yes, you can tell I like alliteration.
Yeah, but that's so cool, and that's what makes it. I remember when I was young, there was a series that they were all standalones, but they would go off of different themes. That was like the one struggle that teen was dealing with. So it kind of reminds me of that. I mean, I used to love those. Like, oh, what struggle should I read this week? Like as a 13-year-old, it's like, I don't know. Right. I love kind of that sort of same theme series, but I'm not the greatest series reader because I'll get bored if it's the same. We're just following the same thing. Like, okay,
change the name, change the place, but it's the same. It's basically like one of those made for TV movies where it's the drama thingy. And that was actually the trickiest part, because I keep a running list going. Okay, and for this one, she's a widow. For this one, she's never been married, but she's got a man who lives with her, and he turns out to be a schmuck. For this one, she's divorced, and then what is the conflict? Because each conflict has to, I don't want anybody to pick up one of the novels and go,
That's
wow,
the same
didn't
one.
you just, didn't you just do that two novels ago? So
I know you have to start keeping like a book Bible, you have to do the like, she's dating a younger man, or maybe she dated a younger man and now he's leaving, and she married an older man and now he's, like you got a lot.
exactly.
You got a lot.
Between that and between names.
Oh my
Because
goodness,
I
names.
I don't know about you, but I have some names I really, really like. So
Yes,
then I have a list
they
of
pop up
names.
everywhere.
Yeah, because it's like I can't have this guy who was in the first novel, that same name showing up.
Right. It's
Somebody
not the
might
same
get
guy.
confused.
Yep. And then I'll end up with alliteration in my books and be like, not everyone can have an M name. Like
Yes.
now I gotta go back and like fix it. It's so silly. It's just like last night I was putting the finishing touches on this, my novel coming out. It's like changing names because I realized I was like, I can't do this. I don't know what it is. It's a brain trick that's just to annoy us writers, I think. And there are
Mhm.
hundreds of thousands of names out there. Why do I always choose the same ones? It's so crazy. Anyway, so you are also, I want to talk about this because you've gone from short story writing to novel writing, you've done newspapers, but you also teach writing. So you have like you talked about a little bit about your rut busting books for writers and for authors. But you also teach writing. So how has that always been something that you've done, like through since your newspaper years? Like you always help people with their writing?
I think the writing workshops really started back in probably after my first book came out, because people would come to a book signing and then they would say, oh, I've always thought about being a writer and blah blah
Mm,
blah. And I always had handouts, right? And then it was like, well, maybe can teach a class on how to do this, or like a class on how to be a freelance writer, I should know.
okay.
Different things like that. And what happened was every time I would teach a class, somebody would say, well, do you have the book? And I'm like, well, no, here's the handouts, go away. So I actually wrote Rut Busting Book for Writers and Rut Busting Book for Authors. Starting the skeleton of it was actually from all my workshops. But then I
Okay.
reached out to all the experts I knew in the different categories, like cover designers or
Yeah.
literary attorneys, and said, here's the chapter I'm doing. It'd be like doing mini interviews. Here's the
Oh,
chapter, here's the question. Do you want to contribute? And I'll throw you in the back of the book too. And that
okay.
is, yeah. So I think I had like over 50 contributors to each book.
Wow. What a good idea.
Well, because I only know what I know, and I can only tell you what works for me, but that doesn't
Yeah.
everybody. I mean, I even had three interior designers, because when I was noticing how nice your room is, I had three interior designers who helped me with the chapter on creating a writing space.
Oh,
Because
nice.
not everybody gets to have a nice big room.
Right.
I mean, some of us are working at a little closet. Some of us
Yes.
are having to go to a cafe to write.
Hmm.
So, I mean, hey, I'm not an interior designer. They had absolutely wonderful ideas. And
Really?
it's
That's
like,
so cool.
yeah, so that's how the two writing books came along. So they sort of like feed off each other, the workshops and the writing books.
Yeah. Yeah. Isn't that funny? Like every time you do one thing, people ask you for more. You go,
Yeah.
well, no. Like, give me a few months. I'll have that for you. So at the moment, are you pretty much focusing on novels?
I really am, because I feel my fourth short story collection came out in February, The Language of Love. And it's like I have an idea for another collection. I have the title. I know broadly what it's going to be about. And I might start playing with it, but it would have to be in between writing the novels.
Yeah, I was going to ask.
So
So how do you manage that these days?
it it can be tricky, because I'm so regimented with writing the novel. So it's like my goal is to get the first draft of the one I'm writing now, Transforming Tessa, get it done, and I have a woman who will be my first reader.
Okay.
She's an editor and everything, but I said, I just want you to read it like as if you paid for it
Mm-hmm.
and tell me everything that's wrong with it. So
Yeah.
while she's doing that,
Yeah.
I will start working on the next novel, but then I'll steal a little bit of time and start, because I can really, you know how it is when you get an idea and it's like, I can really see this short story collection. I know what I want the cover to look like. I may already have stories in my collection that would fit.
Right.
So I will but it'll probably take me a couple of years because I'm doing it in between everything else.
Yep, absolutely. So at the moment, you're still waking up at 4 a.m. to write at 5.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
Lots of coffee. Man, lots of coffee and really big mugs.
So then how long do you write for? Just as long as you want?
I'll usually spend at least an hour and a half writing.
Okay.
And then the next stage is, okay, now what is the marketing I have to do today? So that by 9 o'clock, I'm ready to shift into, okay, now I'm doing my client work.
Right. Okay. Oh, wow. Yeah. So you're like fitting in an entire day before 9 a.m.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my goodness. That might be the way to do it.
But it's the only way, you know what? That's the only way I can do it that I don't feel guilty. And that's also my peak creative time.
Yeah, that's
so
true.
If I'm going to be making something from scratch, I'll do it at 5 o'clock because my brain hasn't gotten cluttered with anything else.
True.
And then it's like, get it down. And if I can do an hour and a half of writing, I can get a lot done. I can do maybe 1,500 words, maybe. You know.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And that way it probably,
that's why it takes me a year to do a novel.
Yeah, but I mean, that's not that long really. But I mean, I wrote 2 books just focusing on 1,500 words a day, because by that time too, a lot of times you're like, I'm done. I mean, some people can write for longer, and some days I can write for longer. But like you said, if you have other things, other jobs, other people counting on you, at least you've done that, and you are moving forward in your novel. And honestly, writing every day, even that little, it keeps it fresh in your head. You're less likely to forget his eye color, even though you still might, but a little less likely, right? So, all right. So for right now, when this podcast goes out, the ebook for Movie Maggie is out, and the print is on pre-order.
Right. It will not. The paperback won't drop till May 30th.
Okay, but
they can pre-order it everywhere.
They can pre-order everywhere, and they'll just have to click the links, and then the link will actually take you guys to all of her books, all of Nancy's books. So if you are interested also in short story collections, or you guys want to check out the rut busting books, which sound really interesting as well, that link will take you everywhere. So, but very cool. Thank you so much for coming on and talking with me, Nancy. It was fun to get to know you.
Well, I have really enjoyed it. And it's always nice to talk to somebody else who's writing short stories and novels.
Yes. I mean, we need to get short stories up there.
That's right.
That'll be our next project.